10 flights, thousands of lives. Only one question: what went wrong? They took off into the sky and never came back. August 2nd, 1947. A British South American Airways plane named Stardust lifts off from Buenos Aires, bound for Santiago, Chile. On board, 6 crew, 11 passengers, and one final message that would become a riddle for the next half-century. As the aircraft approached the Andes, the weather turned brutal. Communication grew faint. Then a final Morse code signal reached the tower. Just one word: Stendek. The operator asked them to repeat it. They did. Twice. Stendek. Stendek. Then silence. No explosion. No distress call. The plane simply vanished into the mountains. For decades, search teams combed the Andes. Nothing. It was as if the stardust had been erased from the sky itself. But in 1998, more than 50 years later, a glacier began to melt. Hikers stumbled upon twisted metal and frozen bodies, perfectly preserved in ice. The stardust had crashed into a mountainside at full speed, entombed in snow ever since 1947. Yet one mystery refused to die. What did Stendek mean? Was it a distress code, a cryptic warning, or something no one has ever deciphered? The mountains gave back the bodies, but kept the secret. The mountains finally gave up for Stardust, but the sky wasn't done keeping secrets. 15 years later, another aircraft would vanish. This time, not a passenger jet, but a military mission bound for war. March 16th, 1962. A Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation departs Guam, carrying 93 US soldiers and crew. Men headed quietly towards Southeast Asia. The night is calm, communications normal. Then, halfway between Guam and the Philippines, the radio goes dead. No distress call, no radar trace. Witnesses aboard a nearby ship report a flash of light in the sky, then silence. Families waited for weeks. Telegrams, rumors, theories. Some whispered about sabotage, others about a covert operation that went wrong. The official report: presumed lost at sea. To this day, the Pacific still hides the truth of Flight 739, a plane that carried soldiers into the night and never brought them home. The Pacific kept its secrets for half a century after Flight 739. Then, one March night in 2014, the world watched as history repeated itself. This time, in real time. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a brand new Boeing 777, lifted off from Kuala Lumpur just before midnight. 239 people aboard. Businessmen, families, children, bound for Beijing. The weather was calm. The captain's voice steady. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Minutes later, the jet vanished from civilian radar. Controllers tried to reach the cockpit. Silence. Military radar caught a ghost image turning west, back across the Malaysian peninsula. Then, nothing. Somewhere between the South China Sea and the vast emptiness of the Indian Ocean, one of the safest planes ever built simply disappeared. Search teams from 26 countries fanned out over the sea. Ships dragged sonar arrays across hundreds of thousands of square miles. Satellites searched for heat signatures. The only evidence: small fragments washing up on distant shores. Pieces of wing, insulation, luggage. But no fuselage, no recorders, no trace of what happened in those final hours. Every theory was explored. Every headline screamed. A catastrophic fire, a deliberate act, a hijacking, a depressurization that slowly silenced everyone on board. But nothing fit perfectly. The plane's path defied logic, turning sharply, climbing, descending, flying for hours after all contact was lost. It was almost as if the aircraft was alive, flying on instinct. A decade later, the search continues. The Indian Ocean, larger than the face of the moon, still hides whatever truth fell from the sky that night. And the name MH370 has become more than a flight number. It's a modern legend, a reminder that even in an age of satellites and constant connection, the sky can still keep a secret. A plane vanishing into the ocean is terrifying enough. But what if the plane never vanished? What if it kept flying, alone, silent, and full of lifeless passengers for hours? August 14th, 2005. Helios Airways Flight 522, a Boeing 737, takes off from Larnaca, Cyprus, bound for Prague. On board, 121 souls. The morning is bright and clear. But just minutes after takeoff, the cabin pressure system malfunctions. The crew doesn't notice. Or perhaps misinterprets the alarm. Within minutes, oxygen levels plummet. The passengers slowly lose consciousness. The flight crew, one by one, slips into hypoxia, a silent, invisible death. Yet the autopilot keeps flying. As the jet climbs to cruising altitude, air traffic controllers try calling. No response. Fighter jets are scrambled to intercept. When they catch up, the sight chills them to the bone. Through the cockpit window, the captain slumped over his controls. The co-pilot motionless beside him. In the cabin, nothing moves. But the aircraft, perfectly stable, gliding through the blue sky like a ghost ship. Then, a flicker of movement. A lone figure, the flight attendant, Andreas Prodromou, stumbles into the cockpit, wearing an oxygen mask. He's one of the only people who regained consciousness in time. He fights to control the plane, to save the 121 lives behind him. But the engines begin to fail. The 737 glides downward, powerless. Moments later, it crashes into the hills of Grammatico, Greece. No one survives. Investigators later discover the cause: a pressurization switch left in the wrong position after maintenance. A small oversight that doomed an entire flight. The Helios 522 tragedy became one of the eeriest in aviation history. Not because it disappeared, but because it kept flying. A silent reminder that sometimes death arrives long before the crash. A Helios flight drifted through the sky like a ghost. But some disappearances happen not in silence, but in the heart of a storm. June 1st, 2009, Air France Flight 447, an Airbus A330, takes off from Rio de Janeiro, bound for Paris. 228 people on board. As night falls, the aircraft enters the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a region infamous for violent storms. Sheets of lightning crack across the sky. The pilots can't see the horizon. Radar glows red and yellow with turbulence ahead. They fly on, trusting their instruments. Then, the instruments begin to lie. Tiny ice crystals freeze the plane's speed sensors. The autopilot disconnects. Alarms erupt. The cockpit fills with confusion and panic. Altitude, airspeed, attitude, nothing makes sense. In the darkness, with no visual reference, the pilots unknowingly pull the nose higher and higher. The plane stalls, the engines roar, but lift is gone. For 4 endless minutes, the massive A330 falls silently through the black Atlantic sky. When contact is lost, Air France launches an immediate search. Days pass, then weeks. The ocean gives up only small fragments of wreckage. The black boxes, the truth of those final moments, remain lost. 2 years later, in 2011, sonar finally detects something deep below, 13,000 feet under the Atlantic. The fuselage, and inside, the recorders, still intact. When investigators play back the final minutes, the sound is haunting. Alarms overlapping, voices confused, the storm raging outside. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't a mechanical failure. It was confusion, the perfect storm of weather, instruments, and human instinct. Flight 447 became a tragic lesson written in the clouds. Even the most advanced machines can be undone by the chaos of nature and a few seconds of human fear. We've seen planes vanish into storms and seas, but this next one is pure chaos. A flight that didn't disappear quietly at all. It disintegrated in broad daylight, on takeoff, in front of hundreds of witnesses, and it changed aviation forever. By the late 1970s, flying had become routine. But on a bright May afternoon, the sky over Chicago turned into a fireball. May 25th, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, lines up on runway 32R at O'Hare International. On board, 271 people. Business travelers, families, holidaymakers, all bound for Los Angeles. At 3:02 p.m., the jet begins its takeoff roll. Everything sounds normal, until seconds later, the left engine tears itself away from the wing. Hydraulic lines rip open, cables snap. The pilots have just seconds to react, but the systems they need most are gone. The aircraft lifts off, banking sharply to the left. Controllers watch in horror as it rolls, stalls, and slams into an open field beside a trailer park. A massive fireball engulfs the wreckage. In 31 seconds, Flight 191 became the worst aviation disaster in American history. The investigation would reveal a chilling chain of shortcuts. Airline mechanics, under pressure to save time, had used heavy machinery to remove engines in one piece, bending critical metal parts in the process. That tiny deformation went unnoticed until that afternoon, when the vibration ripped the mount clean off. The tragedy forced the entire... The crash of Flight 191 forced the world to admit how small mistakes can destroy hundreds of lives. But sometimes, it isn't a mistake inside the aircraft. It's a decision made far beyond it. September 1st, 1983. A Korean Airlines Boeing 747, Flight 007, lifts off from New York, bound for Seoul, with a stop in Anchorage, Alaska. It's a routine journey, until it isn't. After leaving Anchorage, the plane drifts off course. A small navigational error that slowly grows over thousands of miles. Unaware, the pilots cross an invisible line into Soviet airspace at the height of the Cold War. Below, radar operators panic. They assume it's a US spy plane. Fighter jets scramble from Sakhalin Island. The massive 747, filled with 269 civilians, continues calmly on its way, lights twinkling in the night sky. Then, a command is given. Target confirmed. Fire. 2 air-to-air missiles streak through the dark. The first misses. The second tears through the fuselage. The jet disintegrates over the Sea of Japan. There are no survivors. When the news breaks, the world stops. The Soviet Union denies everything, then admits it days later, claiming espionage. The US calls it murder. The truth? The crew never knew they had strayed off course. A simple autopilot misalignment, less than 2 degrees off, drifted them hundreds of miles astray. The incident sparks international outrage. Tensions skyrocket. But out of the horror came one change that would forever alter the skies. US President Ronald Reagan orders GPS technology to be open to the public, so no civilian plane would ever be lost like that again. The price of that progress? 269 lives, and a world that came one breath away from war. 5 years after the fall of Korean Air 007, the world promised the skies were safer. Yet in July 1988, the same fatal chain of confusion, fear, and miscommunication unfolded again. This time, in daylight. Iran Air Flight 655, an Airbus A300, departs from Bandar Abbas, Iran, bound for Dubai. On board, 290 passengers, men, women, and children. Families escaping war for just 1 hour of normalcy. Above the Persian Gulf, a US Navy warship, the USS Vincennes, patrols tense waters, hunting for Iranian gunboats. Radar picks up a new contact climbing from shore. To the crew below, it looks like a hostile fighter jet. The identification codes are misread. Seconds tick by. The radio calls go unanswered. The civilian pilots never even hear them. Then, the captain gives the order. Fire. 2 missiles streak into the sky. In a flash, Flight 655 disintegrates over the Gulf. 290 souls lost. The debris rains down into shimmering blue water. Passports, toys, fragments of hope, all sinking together. The US insists it was a tragic mistake, a misread radar signal in the heat of battle. Iran calls it murder. The truth lies somewhere in the chaos between. Investigators later confirm the plane was exactly where it should have been, following its civilian flight path, never deviating, never threatening. A small blip, a rushed decision, and the most advanced weapons on Earth turned the sky into a killing ground. The wreck of Flight 655 became more than a tragedy. It was a warning that even in an age of precision, the human heart, fear, pride, confusion, can still bring down a plane faster than any malfunction ever could. We have just left the Persian Gulf, where a mistake in the fog of war cost hundreds of innocent lives. But only months later, another disaster struck. This time, not by accident, but by design. December 21st, 1988. The world is wrapped in holiday lights. Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747 named Clipper Maid of the Seas, taxis down the runway at London's Heathrow Airport. Destination, New York City. On board, 259 passengers and crew. Students, families, travelers heading home for Christmas. The aircraft climbs through calm winter skies. But hidden deep inside the cargo hold, inside a Samsonite suitcase, lies a small plastic explosive, wired to a timer. At 31,000 feet over Lockerbie, Scotland, at exactly 7:03 p.m, the timer reaches zero. A flash. A sound louder than thunder. The jet disintegrates in mid-air. 259 people on the plane. 11 more on the ground. The sky rains fire. Pieces of the fuselage scatter across 70 miles of countryside. The largest section crashes into Sherwood Crescent, wiping out entire homes in seconds. And just like that, a peaceful town becomes the center of one of the most complex investigations in history. Within days, investigators find evidence of explosives. They trace the fragments of a cassette player, the wires, the detonator, a bomb built with precision. The trail leads to Libya. Years of political games, accusations, and denials follow. Finally, in 2001, a Libyan intelligence officer, Abdul Basit al-Megrahi, is convicted of the bombing. But even today, debates linger. Was he acting alone? Was he framed? Who truly ordered the attack? The truth remains tangled in the same darkness that consumed the sky that night. The bombing of Flight 103 changed everything. Airports became fortresses. Security tightened around every bag, every passenger, every flight. In the same year that the skies over Lockerbie burned, another aircraft fell from the heavens, not over Europe, but above the deserts of Pakistan. August 17th, 1988. A C-130 Hercules of the Pakistan Air Force takes off from Bahawalpur. On board, General Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq, Pakistan's powerful military ruler. With him, senior generals, the US Ambassador Arnold Raffel, and a dozen others. The flight lasts barely 5 minutes. Witnesses see the aircraft climb, then dip, suddenly jerking, twisting like a wounded bird, before plunging nose first into the sand. There are no survivors. The wreckage burns for hours, the desert wind scattering ashes and documents alike. The official report cites a mechanical failure, but almost no one believes it. The plane had been inspected only days before. The pilots were among the Air Force's best. Then came the rumors: a sabotaged mango crate, poisoned gas in the cargo hold, explosive chemicals disguised as gifts. Elik. Every theory points to one truth: someone wanted Zia dead. But who? His enemies were many, from Afghan factions and Indian intelligence to rival generals, even foreign powers wary of his nuclear ambitions. The wreckage offered few clues. The flight recorders conveniently destroyed in the fire. And as quickly as it began, the investigation faded into silence. The kind of silence that follows when the truth is too dangerous to tell. From the mountains of the Andes to the skies above Lockerbie, from lost signals to mistaken targets, each of these tragedies carries the same truth: that behind every flight number are lives, stories, and lessons written in the clouds. Aviation changed because of them. Safety improved because of them. But their memories remind us: the sky, though vast, always remembers. If you found these stories powerful, subscribe to the channel and join us as we uncover more mysterious events that shaped the history of flight. Like, comment, and share. And remember, every takeoff has a story.